This session is about a real-world hybrid implementation at a university in the U.S. It's a large, very spread out over 70-something campuses. And so we're going to talk about some planning, why we made this, some of the architectural decisions we made there, and then some about the architecture and the design that we put in place with some lessons learned sprinkled throughout. I fly a lot, so I'm all over the world. I love travel, by the way. I love meeting new people, and so this is one of my favorite things to do, other than, hang out with my kids on the beach, which I enjoy as well. But my wife asked me, she said, what if you died, what if your plane crashed between Atlanta and London? Should I get remarried? I said, well, I already know if that was asked the other way, oh, never, right? I can never replace you. But I told her I guess that was fine. I have 2 kids, and you don't want to raise them by yourself. But I said, one favor, I don't let him drive my car. I love my car, right? I have a little sports car, and I don't want anybody to drive it. I said, just sell the car and give him the money. She said, okay. And then I asked, I said, would you let him play with my golf clubs? She said, well, no, he's left-handed. It took a couple of people a second. A little bit about me. My name is Ben Curry. I'm one of the founders of Summit 7 Consulting. I used to be with MindSharp training, SharePoint training. I'm an 8-time MVP, actually 9-time as of last week. I just found out. Thank you, Microsoft. I've written several books for Microsoft. I'm a scuba diving instructor in the Gulf of Mexico. I live on the beach, so for fun, I love diving wrecks and reefs, and I teach all kinds of diving. Any divers? 1, 2, yeah, awesome. My Twitter handle is CurryBen, if you'd like to tweet something good. If not, it's at Ben Curry. I don't know who that is, but I think that's a fabulous idea. This is where I live in the United States. I live in the South. I'm right here on this little tip here in northern Florida. It's in the Gulf of Mexico. I am at 317 Hidden Island Drive, which sounds really awesome, and it's not. It just happens to have a really cool street name. It's not actually on an island. Yes, what's that?
Do you leave that still the same?
Yes. I do. I used to race motorcycles. I love motorcycles. I now have steel rods in my back from a wreck, so I've slowed down a little bit, but I'm walking. Life is good. Some of the books we've had. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the business problem, then the technical planning, and then the technical implementation. If you fall asleep in the first third, which isn't quite as technically cool as the last 2/3, you're going to be lost in the next 2/3. So try to hang with me through the beginning. The case study is about the Kentucky Community Technical College System. It is now in the back, since I'm on a 16:9 deck, and so I had to squeeze it down for the screen. So if you're in the back, feel free to move into the front half of the room, or I will just tell you and you can listen. 16 colleges merged together, so 71 campuses. So there was a lot of different systems. There were 16 different CIOs, essentially. And so all of this had to mush together. That's a big challenge. But we're seeing that a lot more even in corporate acquisitions. It's a lot of state, a lot of federal and province mergers are happening as well. So in short, they ask us to come build them an intranet. Don't you love it? Can you come build us an intranet? Or they use the word portal. Well, I asked 10 administrators the last session what a portal meant, and I got 11 answers. Nobody agrees on what a portal or an intranet is. So believe it or not, the first thing we did is we started talking about what would you consider to be an intranet? And the way I got to that is I said, can you tell me 3 to 5 bullet points of what you would consider a successful project? So something really obvious to start with. They said, we want some digital integration beyond just our ERP system. They used PeopleSoft. And it took them several years to just merge all of the accounting systems in place. That's usually the first system to get upgraded in any type of merger. They wanted to reduce their IT footprint. They have a lot of different systems in place. They have help desk software. They had a BI system in place. They had a student registration software, they had their ERP software, they had file shares, so we had all of these systems. They said we need to go to one place and then find everything from that location. So SharePoint was an obvious match for that, in my opinion. We also have 24 websites running there that are actually running in Sitecore. So I'm not going to talk about those today, but if you have questions afterwards, we decided to go with Sitecore because of the digital marketing capabilities that SharePoint did not have. And then we wanted to standardize processes because they had 16 different colleges. They were doing everything 16 different ways. So as part of this project, we decided it would be a great way to start centralizing some of those processes so there's one way of doing it. I put some of these in here. You can read about them later at your leisure. You'll have them, some of the backstory. Now, I don't know how you do requirements. Who loves to do requirements? I've learned now, I'm getting old, but 23 years of doing this, I found that good requirements make my life so much easier 6 months from now, 10 months from now, when I'm neck deep in the project. So having a good set of requirements that I've agreed upon with the stakeholders, and if possible, get a signature on those. That's what I've learned. Get somebody to write down, this is what we agree on, yea verily, and get a signature. Here's how I gather requirements. I ask a requirement of the person I'm in discovery with. What I do is I assign a difficulty of high, medium, or low. We don't make this hard. What we find is people can, if you give them 3 options on a question, they can answer it. But if you say scale of 1 to 10, they're like, I don't know. Is it hard? Is it medium? Or is it really easy? So I ask them, what's the benefit to your company? They give me a high, medium, or low. I assign the difficulty, which automatically assigns the priority. I do this via the 9 block. If you've never used the 9 block, this was originally based in Lean Six Sigma engineering, which was my original background, was engineering. What we've done is adapted this. It originally was an impact difficulty matrix that we've adapted to SharePoint and all collaborative work and content management work as a benefit difficulty matrix. So what happens here, if the customer tells me that it's a high benefit and I know it's easy, it becomes the #1 priority. I call that the Nike quadrant. You just do it. So we take their technical requirements. This category is just some coolness that I have my own spreadsheet. And no, I won't send you the spreadsheet, but hopefully this gets you part way. The first thing, when you're going to go into Office 365, whether you're going to go hybrid or not, the first thing to understand is authentication. First, how many people have already installed Office 365? A handful, okay. Let's talk about authentication. Office 365 provides authorization. What's the difference in authentication and authorization? Anybody have a driver's license with them? Yeah? Take a look at it. Anybody got one? I'll pull mine out and look. Just a little bit about what's going on with it. The front says my driver's license number, my address. It has a photograph of me. It has things like my birth date, metadata really about me, data about me. Expiration date, height, weight. This authenticates me. On the back, it has my endorsements. Now mine say regular operator's license for a motor vehicle. I have Class M, which is for a motorcycle, and then I actually have a V, which is a vessel or a boat. I have a boat license, basically. Well, that's what I'm authorized for. The front is authenticates me. Authentication is when a user comes into the system, how do we validate that user is who they say they are? The most common way is a username and password. But then we also have like RSA tokens. We have 2-factor authentications. There's a point to this, I promise. All authentication in Office 365 is done by Azure Active Directory. If you're a new Office 365 customer, this isn't apparent because when you set up Office 365, your tenant, it's setting up this Azure tenant all automatically in the background so that when I log into Office 365, it works. They've now put a little thing on the menu in your 365 admin screen, and if I click it, it says Azure Premium. It'll actually now take you into the Azure management screen where you can now expand and buy additional Azure Active Directory features. Now, Azure Active Directory is not just your on-premises Active Directory installed in the cloud. It was basically started from scratch. It is a brand new directory service that essentially was completely rewritten just to be cloud friendly. If you've ever seen two domain controllers communicate, you know that is not cloud friendly traffic. That's an example. Also, they wanted to support claims authentication and inter-service authentication. So it's easy to talk with Salesforce to 365 as an example. So it is it's a completely different Active Directory. You'll see it often. There's an acronym, AAD, or Azure Active Directory, versus Windows Active Directory, and that's the on-premises server version. So the two acronyms, Windows Active Directory, WAD, is on-premises, and AAD is cloud-based. They have similar APIs. They are not the same service. You'll see that there's an AAD Connect, and that's a wizard that installs the sync tools or ADFS or both for you. AAD Connect is just a graphical wizard that does the installation of these other two tools. There are other sessions that give you the technical deep dive on this screen. We're not going to be able to do it on this session. I will take questions after, though, if you have them. I did put a blog here, though. It's from April of last year, almost a year old, a little over a year old. And it's how to install the ADFS 2012 R2 for 365. Now, you don't have to have ADFS to get on 365. Most people will eventually probably have it, but it is not required to get started and to use it. So something to know. Microsoft made it very easy, obviously, to get your Active Directory synchronized with the cloud. Office 365 authentication. We have our on-premises Active Directory. We synchronize via a tool called AAD Sync, and that's the Azure Active Directory. It's a sync tool. It used to be called DirSync, Directory Sync. That tool has now been retired. This is not an update of that tool. It is a brand new tool. That is synchronized into Windows Azure Active Directory, and then that is accessed for authentication by SharePoint, Exchange, Outlook, Link, any of the applications up in Office 365. Any questions? You have 4 identity management options. The first option is you can just have a cloud managed option. So I log into 365. I have a username and password that only exists in the cloud. Useful for testing, small extranets possibly. I've seen a few use cases. Most of the time, though, we don't want to do that because then our users will have 2 usernames and passwords. And that's just another username and password that they're going to put on the back of their keyboard on a sticky note. Yeah, several people smile. You know it's true. The second way is we can use just the Windows Azure Active Directory tool. We can just use the Connect. It's going to synchronize your Active Directory account information and the password hash. Now, some security people flip out about this. It is not sending the password, only the password hash. We could argue that in a security session. It's not in this one. Either way, we need to synchronize our on-premises Active Directory object information to the cloud no matter what. Somehow, we have to get the information about you and your users into the cloud, and it needs to match what's on premises. This is especially true when you're doing a hybrid implementation, because some of the applications your users use will be on premises, and sometimes it'll be in the cloud. And the way we get that user information to be consistent is via Active Directory being consistent. The third way is we can use AAD Sync. I need to update this, Bob, to send all of the user information, but for password, what we're going to tell Microsoft, when they come into Office 365, you send them to my Active Directory on premises, and I'll authenticate that user. Well, that has an obvious benefit that we control the point of authentication. The obvious negative is if our local data center is down, they can't log into 365. The other way with Active Directory Sync, ours can be down, but Microsoft controls the point of authentication. The fourth way is you can go buy a third-party federated tool like Ping or Shibboleth. I've used the Ping tool. It's nice. It's really expensive, but it's cool, and it allows you to authenticate to anything from anywhere, basically. You name the cloud service, and they've got a connector for it. We've used it for PeopleSoft, Salesforce, several other tools out there. They're proud of it, though. But the upside to this is you can lose everything on premises and your users still function. And as soon as your on-premises comes online, everything just syncs back behind the scenes. So there are some third-party. They do need to be 365 certified. I put some details in here about those 4 options so that you would have them when you get home. These I've taken straight from Microsoft's deck, so I did not create these, full disclosure, but I wanted you just to have them here so you could use them. So when we're talking about moving to the cloud, whether it's full cloud or whether it's hybrid, the first thing we need to think about is a concept called workloads. That is, what are the technical buckets that we do or perform on premises today? Things like document management, scanning. Maybe at a higher level, we have project management teams, we have project teams, we have engineering teams. So where can we find buckets of information that we can move all or part of those to the cloud? Very rarely can we take an organization and forklift everything into the cloud, especially overnight. So what we like to do are find things that are easily isolated. So find a process that doesn't have a lot of line of business integration. It's not connected to a lot of other file systems or site collections, as an example. Where if it's completely all in its own bucket, that's something that that's a highly likely candidate for us to then move that into the cloud. So that may be something we move early on. So what we're looking at are finding those things that make sense to move to the cloud. We also try to find things that benefit from the cloud. Office 365 allows us to easily leverage things like Windows Live ID to authenticate to our sites. It has great mobile device, so it has mobile device management we now get with 365. Rights management is kind of a bear to set up on premises. It's just baked in 365. We get it from day one. Data loss prevention, DLP, is baked into 365 from the first day. So it's not only what things can we easily move to the cloud, but it's what things can we benefit from it being in the cloud. I put some options up here for the workloads. You guys can, these are common ones that we look at. Some of the big hybrid challenges, though, once we've decided what will go to 365 and what won't, we have some challenges. One of the first challenges is just communicating with users of, where do I put stuff? Do I put it on my on-premises SharePoint? Do I put it in my cloud SharePoint? Where do I put stuff? And that comes down to a good design and a lot of communication. Now, what I find is a really good navigation helps a lot here. So if we build a good navigation, either global nav and or suite bar, both, and be able to, with that navigation similar, whether I'm in the cloud or on premises, and give users an easy way to find their way around. The second way is search. One of the first things we do moving to a hybrid cloud is put in search that can crawl both on-premises and the cloud. That makes it very easy for users to find what they're looking for, and they don't need to know if that process is cloud hosting or if it is on-premises hosted. Some other challenges, user profile application is not completely integrated between on-premises and the cloud yet. I highly suspect that's coming. I don't know for sure. But I do know there's work being done. I hear in Redmond that that's going to get a lot better, that we'll continue to see more social integration. And I'm optimistic that's true. I know a lot of our clients have asked for it. Managed metadata is another great way to get some consistency between on-premises and Office 365. However, there's no tool today that allows you to synchronize your on-premises term store with the cloud. Out on our Summit 7 blogs, we've got a script that you can download and run. You can edit it for your environment. That'll synchronize your term store with the cloud, including the GUIDs. The term store is a GUID-based, or GUID, however you say it, is a GUID-based product because of multi-languages is one of the big reasons. And so you want to make a lot of our code is GUID-based and not the actual noun. or the text you see on the screen. So if you do synchronize with your 365 term store, I would probably do it and make sure you include the GUIDs. How will you share BCS, a single and secure store? You need to import a certificate for full hybrid. The 101 to this is you get a public certificate for your on-premises SharePoint. You put it into every server in the farm. You take that same certificate, you put it into the secure store in your 365 environment. Your 365 environment then uses that certificate to build an SSL connection on premises. And then that's how we can get some hybrid communication between the two. There's also Power BI, which Microsoft has for the cloud, and it does not require this. Power BI can actually connect directly to your on-premises analysis and reporting servers. Something to keep in mind is doesn't require this hybrid connectivity. One of the first challenges can be the licensing in Office 365. I've talked to 3 different Microsoft salespeople about a certain licensing issue, and I got 3 different answers, unfortunately. I'm sure we see that. You probably see that already today. It gets worse in the cloud. For example, I already have all my users licensed for SharePoint on premises. Well, now I have cloud SharePoint online, and I have licenses there again. What licenses are they covered for on premises? Well, it depends on what kind of licensing you already have today. One of the great things about Office 365 is most of the Office 365 license types, every user gets 5 copies of Office 2013 Pro Plus included in the 365 license. A lot of times that alone pays for the 365 tenant for our customers, because I no longer have to pay for that Office 2013 Pro Plus license. 5 copies. That gives you an iPad license, their work Mac, their home PC, and one for the yacht PC. Why not? I don't have a yacht, but if I did, I probably would have a PC on it. I gave you the link here. Now this link will help you a lot. Let me see if I've got this up. I could show you a little bit. There's also a link to a spreadsheet on there, which is really cool. It looks like this. Can you see this in the back? What I can do is pick my option here, like let's say Office 365, and let's pick my service. Let's say SharePoint Online. Let's say that I'm government, and I want the E3 license. And what it does down here is show what are my features that are supported in my license type at the bottom. So I gave you the link to this spreadsheet. This is very powerful when trying to figure out your licensing for 365. They keep this updated. There's a link to it out there on OneDrive. Like I said, it's updated constantly. You'll find that useful. It's updated about every 90 days. So probably every 90 days, if you're making a decision, make sure to go back and review it. I've done planning for something. A lot of times in government, it takes longer than 90 days. It takes months. We have to go back and just make sure. There's actually a SharePoint Online only. You'll see 2 options for that, Plan 1 and Plan 2. There's also an Exchange Plan only, by the way, and it's also called Plan 1 and Plan 2, yet they have nothing in common. Make sure you take a look at these. These are definitely one-off. Most people, it's really hard to not move Exchange to the cloud. I mean, it usually is the very first thing. 94% of all businesses go to 365 for Exchange Online. 94%. So that is what drives people there. Because the Exchange Online experience is identical to on-premises now. There's almost no differences. We're even moving mailboxes from Exchange Online to on-premises and vice versa in the middle of the day, and that user doesn't even know it. I mean, we're talking, they have that hybrid down slick. SharePoint's not that slick yet. In fact, they probably will never support moving sites between cloud and on-premises. There are no migration tools for moving from on-premises to the cloud. There's some third-party products that do it, but there's not. The reason is it's not the same system. SharePoint Online and SharePoint on-premises, there's not feature parity. They have a lot of similarities, and that will continue, but they're on 2 different trajectories for software development. You saw they announced last week that there will be probably a permanent on-premises version, that's going to be stayed. There's going to be on-premises SharePoint for a long time. And so there's a lot of efforts being made to make sure that the online and the on-premises talk to each other. So I think that's really good news for all of us. That allows us to use on-premises when we need it and cloud for when we need it, with tools for the two to talk to each other. For this client in 2010, we looked at using Office 365 then. Back then, it originally was called Business Productivity Online Suite, BPOS. BPOS. Whoever came up with that name should be shot. And if you look at the SLA, Office 365 isn't quite 365. They actually guarantee themselves some downtime, so it's just something to be aware of. It's likely still more stable than most people's data centers. Hybrid cloud was a huge challenge. We just didn't have the federated services support. So if you're in 2010 today, you're going to have to get up to 2013 to be able to go hybrid. Okay, so 2013 is, and I believe Microsoft now makes 2013 a requirement for hybrid services. 365 matured a lot as a platform. That is where we got the support for the on-premises farm as well. But what we found here was we had a large employee portal that was based in SharePoint 2010. And we found that we just didn't have the flexibility for features, and we had a lot of farm code, so full trust code farm solutions that wouldn't run in the cloud. So what we did is we moved all of their team and project sites to 365. We left their employee portals on premises. And we then changed updated navigation so they both match each other. So users really don't know when they leave on premises or when they come into on premises, we have all the navigation and master pages the same. So essentially the same branding, essentially the same navigation. Microsoft gives you no limit on your OneDrive. So your My Site shared document to live folder up in the cloud, there's no limit now. So your users can put all their junk. I mean, most of people I've talked to don't manage their My Sites anyway. So they have on-premises My Sites, but it's a big bucket full of chaos, and we don't know what's in there anyway, so why not let Microsoft screw with that? We call it a BFOC, B-F-O-C. It's an acronym, bucket full of chaos is what it means. If you ever see me write it, that's what I mean. Let's let Microsoft mess with that bucket full of chaos. Why are we worried with it? So a lot of times those My Sites are the first thing we'll shove off into the cloud. Here, Microsoft, your problem. Some of these big team sites that spin out of control, great. Let Microsoft deal with the backups restore. So something to keep in mind is that there's a lot of times what we leave on premises is because of line of business integration. It's because it's a lot of customization. Those are two key reasons. We do a lot of list lookups. So for SharePoint on premises, where let's say we got a customer site and a SQL database for another system where there's 200,000 or 300,000 customers. I don't want that feeding off of a SharePoint list. I just want to do my lookups in my form straight off of the parent system, master data system. Well, if we split to cloud, that makes that really hard. So some of those forms we've had to keep on premises. There's a lot of reasons you're going to have to stay on premises with data, but there's a lot of opportunity as well to go to the cloud. So a little bit more about this. And I would just say one, budget considerations, even if the cloud isn't a perfect solution, the UK, I guess you don't have your full data center in place. It's coming, I hear. I don't know. You can use 365 today, but I know there's a lot of restrictions in the EU about data location. So I know that's a priority for Microsoft. I don't work for Microsoft, so I don't know what's coming with that. But I do know that is coming. In the US, I know that most companies can't justify on-premises for a lot of data. We see up to an 85% cost savings by going to the cloud. I know a lot of our government customers, the basic Office 365 license is like $4 per user a month. And that gives them unlimited personal storage, Link, Exchange, SharePoint Online, Delve. So it's really hard to justify not doing it. And what we're seeing is, even though executives know it's not the best business decision, it doesn't matter. They're telling us what to do, and we say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, and we go do it. If you're using a hosting provider, we do commonly use, when we talk about hybrid SharePoint, we have on-premises and we have 365. That on-premises could also be hosted. It could be Amazon, it could be Azure IaaS, infrastructure as a service. or it could be a standard hosting provider. And that's fine too. Just know whenever you see on-premises and the hybrid, all the TechNet articles, MSDN, that is your IaaS service, essentially. So there's a lot of benefits: speed and agility, flexible capacity, global reach. Amazon and Azure are both pretty good for that. If you haven't looked recently, Azure has caught up with Amazon Web Services in a lot of areas. There's still use cases where Amazon is just better, but for 80, I don't know, make up a number, right? 80% of the time, Azure's probably just as good. Some of the pros, cons about Office 365. You know, it's easy to set up. It's quick to ready state. One thing you'll notice about 365, SharePoint Online, is so many of the things that make it as a pro, the flip side is the con. Like, we don't have to manage service applications. Well, we can't manage service applications. We don't have to manage web applications. Well, that entire web application general settings, you don't get to modify most of those settings. I don't get web application policies, like as an example. I really like web application policies. Well, I don't have to worry about my new admin changing my service app settings, but I can't go in there sometimes and set granular on like permissions or federation like I can on premises. So it's kind of like being married. I've read that several times. The things you love about your spouse is the flip side's why they drive you crazy. And if you try to fix what drives you crazy, you break the whole reason you love them to begin with. So I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but this is kind of like being married in a lot of ways, now that I think about it. I love my wife, in case you ever meet her. I said it out loud. I love my wife. Some of the cons, you know, lack of social integration, line of business integration. A lot of third-party products don't work in 365, and if they do, word of caution, they don't work the same. And it's not what I found, you know, Nintex is a good example. I love Nintex, they're a partner of ours. Their 365 product doesn't do everything their on-premises product, but it's because Microsoft hasn't opened up the API completely to vendors. It's usually not the third parties, you know, that's not their fault, if you will. But something to keep in mind, if you're, most of it does work, which is nice, because you can have Nintex on premises and Nintex in the cloud, but there are differences in the product. I put a couple screens in here about what you get online versus on premises. I'm not going to go through those here. They're for you later. So what we did on premises is we put the ERP integration on premises, and it was because of custom code, third-party products, and we had to have low latency between the SharePoint servers and the data source, which was PeopleSoft. We did tests, and the page loads and the data lookups were just too much going over the cloud from Microsoft's data centers on premises. Those were the big three decisions that we decided to leave some of their stuff on premises. It also gave us more control over governance because we controlled the systems. Things like publishing framework, the ability to have we do a lot of publishing on their portal, so we do authoring in one-site collection, and we have code that then moves that into their actual public through a workflow. So legal and HR and marketing all approve it. And we just didn't have that capability. Also, we don't have the publishing framework, does not exist in 365. Microsoft announced that, I believe it was like March 6th of this year, there are no more public websites in 365. If you already have one, it's going to work for 2 years, but then they're going to shut it down. So no public websites. If you have one, start looking for another solution. I'm a little disappointed that they turned something off without giving us another option. Yeah, I don't know why. It won't affect most of the world. Most of those were already adopted were US. So it was only, 500,000 people. Yeah?
If they have a project, what can premises for an Office 365? Like, where does the database sit? Like I'm saying, part of the database is on the cloud or part of the database where
You're talking about in a hybrid configuration? No, so that's a really good question. Where does the database live? I've got a few more slides, but I'll answer that now. Each site collection lives in a database, and that site collection can't span content databases. So when your SharePoint Online tenant You have a content database up in, it's really in Azure, is where it's at, right? Your site collection is in that database. On premises, you have another server farm. You still have a complete server farm on premises that you're now wiring up with some site collections in the cloud. Office 365, you do not get your own farm. You get a tenant. Anybody ever worked with multi-tenancy on premises? If you want to know how it works, go look up multi-tenancy. You can actually install SharePoint 2013 on premises in what's called multi-tenant mode. That is where 365 started at. It's not a multi-tenant today, but most of those concepts apply. Essentially, every site collection you create in 365, you get stamps a GUID. And you can have multiple site collections, but every site collection you have in 365 still has that GUID associated. That's how when you do searches, you're in managed metadata, you only get your organization's content because only those have that GUID. And it's secure. It's EAL level 2 and maybe higher at this point in security.
Because some of the databases, like the configuration databases, so I'm coming down from that end.
You don't have a config DB in SharePoint Online. There is no central admin. So Office 365, you don't get central administration. Here, I'll show you. If I can get it, it's a good enough question. Well, this session's technically about hybrid, so there's some assumptions made, but you seem like a really nice guy, so I'm kidding. Let me show you. I'm going to log into my 365 portal here. If my computer will behave here. I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me do this. Yeah, it really does not like this display at all outside of PowerPoint. Let's see if this will work. There you go. This should work. Okay. Thank you, though. So when I log into Office 365, you're going to come into the portal, and this is your Office 365 admin portal. You'll get things like health here, and then these are all of your configuration items on the left. And what you're going to see at the bottom is the SharePoint admin. See where I'm at the bottom left-hand corner? This is your SharePoint admin login. And what you're going to get is a tenant view of Office 365 of SharePoint. You're going to get very limited access. So this essentially is your cloud, if you will, central admin. But you don't manage service application databases. You have very limited view into these service apps. Like if you go into them, you'll notice that you do not have the full, for example, search. You have a reduced number and amount of configuration options. So 365 is really easy, but you don't have as many features or flexibility. So it's cheap and easy. On premises, you have more functionality and it's expensive. However, Microsoft's releasing things like Delve and Power BI that are only available in the cloud. So some of the new cool. Now, that doesn't mean you can't leverage that from on-premises. You can. The way they're architecting the products now, I continue to run on-premises, and I can get my Power BI data running in the cloud against on-premises data and displaying on-premises. So that is the future. So a true blend of hybrid. That's where we're going. So to answer your question, and you'll notice, by the way, I run a Mac. I'm a Mac. I like Windows. I love all computers, but I prefer Mac, and it works brilliantly with 365. Actually, I found it works better than my PC, for what it's worth. I have almost no hiccups with 365 authentication, and with my PC, I do. It glitches, and I didn't say that out loud. Don't get me in trouble. I love Microsoft. Hybrid is the future. Let's talk about it. We decided to go search first in the hybrid implementation for this client. I like to pick something and that be my starting point. So create a very linear roadmap, and let's say we did search, then my sites, then project sites, and then team sites, right? I'd try to not do it all at once. It's so much easier to bite off if you do it in little bites. So we decided to go with search first to solve this user frustration problem is I can't find stuff. It's probably the #1 complaint that I get during business discovery. I can't find stuff. We also used it as an opportunity to fix their on-premises search. So we just re-engineered search. So now when users go search, they find everything in the cloud, and because we also refined their on-premises search server, they can find everything on premises, but it made it look like it was all under this one project. Oh, well, we love SharePoint Online. We love, it was just a way to get users to adopt it as well. Just fix stuff, really basic things. Don't make them log in twice. They get 2 log. Every time they go to a site, get a browser pop up. I mean, those are the little things that drive users crazy. We don't think much about it. We had a lot of search decisions to make. We actually decided to first just build out a search portal on premises. We called it search, nothing complex. But we went ahead and we crawled some of the very commonly used file shares as well. So we surfaced a lot of the user data in that search portal to get people to come in and use the search portal first, and then we integrated that with 365. Now we're in the process of getting link, exchange, everything into it for e-discovery, because you can now create a hybrid search that goes across all of your systems so you can find information anywhere. And what drove that was mainly compliance and e-discovery. We were faced with a problem, though. On premises, it was quite easy to, we had self-service site collection creation as an example you don't get in 365. Document libraries, mail-enabled document libraries, we don't have those in 365, you do on premises. So there's a lot of things you don't have. There's not parity between the two. Well, we thought at first, 16 colleges, this isn't hard as far as the site architecture. We'll go to each of those colleges, we give them their own site collection, and they go manage it their own way. Sound logical, right? Well, when we went to each of the colleges and we asked those presidents, who's going to manage the site collection, they're like, well, I don't have time to manage that site. What? It's the very same people who kept coming to us saying, well, we want Office 365. Give us SharePoint, give us SharePoint. They said, well, what do you mean we have to manage something? I thought you flip it on and you guys do all the work and we just use it. I was like, okay, well, what do you say to that, really? It's really, they think it's just magic. I said, okay, well, we'll try. So tell me how you're organized. So just tell me how you're organized. Well, I don't know how we're organized. Okay, well, what do you do here? Well, where can I get that process? Well, Bob knows how to do it down the hall. Just go ask him. And he doesn't have time for us. If he does, he gives us half the process. There's a real world challenges about trying to do this. This isn't just a SharePoint Online problem. I guess if you're going to do this one day, which you probably will in some fashion, now's the right time to get people to buy in the fact you're going to have to help me design this. I'm willing to help you do it, but you got to give me something. It's not just magically going to turn on and work. Well, we thought that each college would get its own SP site, which is a site collection. We couldn't get buy-in to it. So what we decided to do was that we would create more of a functional-based architecture in SharePoint Online. All right, here's what I mean by that. We created one that was like executive, one that was finance, HR, dean, IT. And we created site collections in 365 by what people do. And then each college would get a sub-site under, for example, IT, and each of those IT departments got their own sub-site structure under that site collection. The reason we did this is we didn't have to pre-create any of the sites except just for these functional areas, which I didn't need everybody's buy-in to do. Right? I looked at how the college was architected, and I was able to say, okay, I can at least create these site collections. Now what happens is, as people come to us and ask us for a site, we say, what do you do here? And we already know where we're going to create their sub-site. All we did was take the 4-letter acronym for the college, underscore what they do. So for example, under IT, it was ACTC underscore IT is their name. I don't get hung up on naming as long as it's consistent. It's easy to go write a PowerShell script to fix something you consistently did wrong. It's really hard to write a PowerShell script to fix something that was arbitrarily implemented. I promise you that's true. So consistency is key on naming. Couple challenges, though, what I found between trying to architect SharePoint Online for functional versus organizational. Organizational, has some advantages, It was easier security inheritance, but it required buy-in. It doesn't adapt to org changes, as well, and it's challenging to centralize processes. Functional made it easier we didn't have to have buy-in, then it makes it easier to re-engineer processes. For example, like they wanted to merge all their HR together, so having a single HR site collection and then giving sub-sites for the colleges made it easy for us to centralize those HR processes. So there's an advantage both ways. But what I wouldn't try to do is mix them into a single layer, if you will. It's easier to choose one or the other and the other and have an exception. That makes sense, kind of? Anybody had to deal with this before? Which way you go? I'd be interested to know afterwards. I'll give you my email. I'd be interested to know how you fought that challenge. So in the 365 admin interface, he just beat me to it. Some of the issues with it, you've got to be a global admin, and that means you're an administrator over Exchange, Link, SharePoint, Yammer, everything to be able to do some things like DNS, to be able to set up your domain. You've got to be a SharePoint admin to manage the other services. Right? So this is a smaller bubble. So think about one huge bubble that is your global admin with smaller bubbles in it. This one is your SharePoint tenant administration. And then inside of that, you would have a site collection admin. So that's kind of your governance layer if you peel back the onion, if you will. We don't have the granularity in permissioning that we do on premises. So that's just a word of caution as you get in there. Now, what I've found is these are just, I call them big rocks when we're doing engineering and planning. If we know these big rocks are in the way and you can't move them, we don't just sit there and stare at it because it's not going anywhere. We engineer around it from the beginning. Most of the limitations we find in permissioning in SharePoint Online, we can work around with some planning. I do hear there's an isolated, and I know it's in beta, there's a SharePoint admin, an isolated SharePoint interface still coming. I haven't seen it yet. If it's what we just got, then it's not what I was hoping for. Paul, have you heard by chance? So I'm hoping for something better. This is in here just for fun. You will want to know the difference in SP Site and SP Web. I won't ask for a show of hands in case you don't know what they are. And this is becoming very important because this is third-party features, how they deploy, how permissioning is done, how your governance is done. If you don't know the differences, a little bit of homework for you to go look at. One of the big differences here when we were doing this planning with all the colleges, because we did decide to go with the architecture we did, where we have HR and then all the colleges have their own subsite, that does mean, though, all these colleges don't have access to the second stage recycle bin, because that's a function of site collection administrator, not site owner. And so that was an issue, and it's an ongoing issue. It just means somebody has to pick up the phone and hit restore if it's needed. Some of the things are harder than you would think they would be. Like creating site collections seems like a really simple thing. Let's say that your organization gets wired up with Office 365 and you get your tenant. Now, who's going to create the site collections? Because you have to go to that admin interface I showed you earlier to do it. I guess you could PowerShell it as well, but most people don't. Most people just go to the UI. You just need somebody designated with a backup of who's going to create site collections. To create a site collection, I've got to be an administrator in the tenant. Right? So you can't really delegate site collection creation. It's going to be you, probably, or somebody on your team. Some of our ongoing challenges we're having, the available features are constantly changing in 365. That is not slowing down. One of the other challenges we see is Microsoft will tell us a new feature is going to be released in Q3, Q3. Okay, well, we don't know if that's going to be on, what, September 1st, or be what, November, what is it? I'm bad at math. I'm from Alabama. Yeah, we don't know which one it's going to be. Yeah, July 1st to September 30th. It could be anywhere in that window, and we don't know exactly when it's going to be. That's a little bit of a challenge. There is an option, when you go into your 365 tenant, it says early release or first release. Now, if you choose to be a part of that, and I noticed the other day it was on by default with a couple test tenants we did, it means you're getting stuff as soon as it releases. Oh, I found something out. We're getting the new book out now. If you uncheck that, within 24 hours, everywhere that feature was used will get turned off. Okay, so if you chose, let me show you this. You know what, this is important enough, I'll just show you. This was bad juju. Let's see, where was that at? Yeah, it is off every time I go here, isn't it? Okay, it's okay.
If you unplug the output and plug it back in, it might work.
Well, I only have 5 minutes, so let me not. Go look it up. There'll be a thing called early release. It's an option in your tenant. But if you choose it, and then users build things based on those features, you go into your tenant and you uncheck that box, it will then come back and remove that feature everywhere it was used. So just a word of caution. You need to decide early on, we have to decide yes or no on that feature. I like it, but I can see why other people wouldn't want all the new features released immediately. The navigation can be difficult. We like to modify the suite bar, which is that bar at the very top of your tenant, because it's an easy way to get some consistency and so people can find their way around. The problem is the way Microsoft loads that suite bar is constantly changing, and so it's breaking our code. It's not a hard fix, every time it breaks, but it is a fix nonetheless. Users see it, it breaks, they call us, we have to fix it. The other is, synchronizing with on-premises farm. Well, what we've been doing, we've been trying to keep the on-premises farms patched and cumulative updated with the match SharePoint Online. I mean, SharePoint Online is roughly SharePoint 2013, but that's going to continue to change. What Microsoft is telling us is SharePoint Online is taking a completely different path than on-premises. What we're going to get is an API that's compatible with on-premises, so it's going to be really hard to start keeping these in parity anyway. So a lot of people who their plans were to keep these UI matching, doesn't matter anyway. It's going to be two different systems, essentially. Things like a configuration database, they don't really have one in SharePoint Online. It's a completely different system. So more and more we're seeing that change from the on-premises to be cloud-friendly. Trying to keep these synchronized anyway, it does require a lot of management. Instead, I like to focus our efforts on keeping search integrated, well-oiled and running, so on-premises and cloud, keep search integrated and working very well. I like to keep our navigation updated on-premises and in the cloud, and that is another way to keep users from getting lost. So if you imagine this Grand Canyon and you have cloud on one side and on-premises on the other, in my mind, those two beams that cross this are navigation and search, because I think those are the two foundational components to keeping this hybrid architecture put together. One of the things we find is we want to put in changes mid-year, but if that requires any type of dollars, we can't get that until the next fiscal year starts. It's been a little bit frustrating. Microsoft many times is offering us early adopter, and they'll give us a huge discount if we'll get on an early adopter, but I can't get even a small amount of budget to jump on that because it's a government institution here, to get on board with that, so that our What we wish was our product lifecycle can't be the lifecycle because of budget constraints. So usually we have to go next year, but man, lately, a year from now, technology is changing so fast. How do I do, it's a real challenge in IT now. How do I do forecasting that wants to do a 3-year plan? I don't know what I want to buy in 3 years. I don't even know what's going to be in Microsoft's cloud. And do you know? We don't know, do we? And so that's a real challenge. We've done some things like we asked for ongoing cloud collaborative innovation dollars. I mean, basically say, we know we're going to do some collaboration in the cloud. We know we're going to do some search advancements. And so giving a more or generalized bucket of dollars, that's helped. Still not perfect, though. We're moving their on-premises portal to Azure, infrastructure as a service, just something at the end for fun. It won't go in Office 365, and a lot of it is around the lack of customization ability, full trust. Farm Solutions. We actually cut some of their hosting costs from $12,000 a month to about $4,500 a month. Just because there's a lot of power, everything that goes along with a proper server hosting, one that actually can't crash and go down. Some fun numbers there. This doesn't include, maintenance, branding, anything else that goes along with it. It's just the raw, keep the light on the server hosting cost. Hybrid environments are large. The big thing is take small steps, use the tools you already know. It's actually pretty good advice, I think. Don't try to do everything at once. I like to start with things that are very easy and visible. All right, so let's put in something first that everybody is going to notice and everybody is cool. And that's a great way to start this project because eventually you're going to do something that's hard with a negative impact. Let's already get some grace built up before we get to that point. That's the way I like to do it. Focus on people. Don't break your corporate culture, organizational culture. And yes, the technology can be expensive, but it is the easiest ingredient. It's almost always cheaper. The planning, the discovery, hybrid, the actual hybrid connectivity piece that we talked about early on is like riding a bike. It's actually quite easy. I can do it. I demoed it in San Francisco, front to back in less than an hour and 15 minutes. So I mean, to do it's not hard. But it's like riding a bike. The first time you do it, it's going to take a while. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. Most people in here, though, aren't consultants, so it's not like you're going to do it over and over again. Now, I'll wrap it up by saying this. TechNet is your friend when configuring hybrid. I didn't walk you through all those steps because when you go to TechNet, they've got step-by-step, and now they're dead on the money. Neil Hodgkinson and those guys have been on that site making sure that's nailed, and it's exactly what you need. Thank you very much. You were very attentive, and I appreciate it. Thank you.